This is one of the subjects I find most important to talk about. When I was in office and when I had the privilege of serving, I had to engage on many different topics. I worked on Zika and Ebola and the opioid epidemic and a host of other public health issues. But what I found is when I would go out into communities and talk about issues and more importantly listen to what people cared about, very often behind their stories were stories of loneliness and stories of isolation. And that's what first clued me in to the fact that there was something going on that we needed to address. Now, I found this to be true in communities all across America. It wasn't just urban communities, it was also rural communities. It wasn't just people who define themselves as liberal or conservative. It was people across the age and political spectrum who seemed to be affected by loneliness. Now, if you want to get a sense of just how broadly this impacts the country, you have to look a bit at the research studies. And I will caveat this by saying that there are a lot of them, and they're often all over the map. They sometimes use different scales to measure loneliness. They sometimes look at different study populations. So it's hard sometimes to do apples-to-apples comparisons. But what you can see is even if you look at the good studies and at the lower bound, of the range of loneliness that you see, it is in the double-digit percentages of adults who in America who say that they are struggling with loneliness. And if that many say they are struggling with loneliness, I guarantee you the real number is higher. And just by virtue of comparison, consider that we have just under 10% of people in the United States who have diabetes. And you start to realize that loneliness affects far more people than the number of people who have diabetes, the number of people who smoke, and the number of people who are impacted by many other conditions that we put a lot of money into. You might say, well, that's because those are really consequential. When people smoke, they get cancer, they get other illnesses. When they have diabetes, there are serious vascular complications that can come from that can lead to heart attacks. So that's why we have to put money into that. But more and more, the research is telling us that there are real health consequences of loneliness. And some of the studies, including meta-analyses done by Julianne Holt-Lunstad and others, have shown that people who struggle with loneliness have a significantly higher risk of premature death. In fact, their risk of premature death seems to be, their risk of premature mortality is about similar to people who smoke about 15 cigarettes a day. It's greater than people who actually are struggling with obesity. And think about how much money we put into addressing obesity and cigarette smoking. There are reasons for why this may be the case, and I'm happy to share some of those theories with you. But the bottom line is that loneliness affects our health. And social connection can help keep us healthy, not just prevent illness. And this is actually a really important point I want to make. It's not just about preventing diabetes and heart disease. It's about enabling us to be more and to perform more at every stage of our life. There's nobody I know who just wants to be disease-free, right? Or who just wants to be on the opposite edge of having diagnosable illness. We want to be functioning at the top of our game. We want to be fully present when we're with our family. We want to be fully contributing members of society and as highly functioning as we can be. And it turns out that to do that, to optimize our function in life, we have to not only have good physical health, but we have to have good emotional health. And a component of our emotional health is our social connection.
So